John chapter 2. Jesus has his first miracle in Cana. So I'll read the passage, we'll pray, and then we'll break it down. And I think then afterwards, if you guys are keen, I get a bunch of photos from Fiji. You guys keen for that? Yeah? Yeah? Lots of head nodding. Apparently your vocal cords are broken. But it begins in verse 1. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. And when the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to them, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now." This is the beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Lord God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your heart towards us and your love for us, Lord. I pray that you would just go before us in this time, Lord, that you would bless the reading of your word, Lord. You would bless the teaching of your word, Lord, and anything that's not of you, Lord, anything that is of me, Lord, I pray that you would remove it, Lord. You take it out of my mouth, Lord, but fill me with your words, and fill my mouth with your words and what you have to say, Lord. Prepare our hearts as we go before you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Sweet. So it says on the third day. This could mean the third day of the week, maybe 3 days prior from the previous passage. We're not sure, but it's probably around 6 days into Jesus' ministry. So his ministry has just started. It's the very beginning of his ministry. And Cana was the hometown of this guy named Nathanael, one of Jesus' disciples. Jesus found Nathanael and Philip in or around Bethsaida. So where Jesus had called Nathanael and Philip was 144 kilometers away. So when it says on the third day, it probably took them the 3 days to go from Bethsaida or Bethany all the way to Cana for this wedding. Now, Jewish weddings are slightly different than our weddings. They were set up. Arranged marriages, so you didn't find someone who thought you looked cute and started to court and date them, take them to Macca's for dinner, and then continue on. It was like, hey, my family, dad talks to dad of other family, and they say, hey, you got a daughter, and I have a son. Match made in heaven. Signed, sealed, delivered. That's the way it worked. And regardless of that, there was still love in the relationship, and it was a very happy occasion. And it was very public, very expensive, but there was so many people that would come from everywhere. Your families and friends would come from all over the place, like we see Jesus and his disciples coming from Bethsaida all the way home to celebrate this marriage. It would also, as it is today, be the best day of this couple's lives. Everyone comes around to enjoy, partake, watch them get married. And it wasn't just a one-day thing. It was a couple of days. This would happen over a few days. So it's quite a big ordeal. And socially, it was customary that the families that were of the bride and husband would take care of everything that needed to be taken care of. And they need to make sure the guests were looked after. And so they needed to make sure everything was prepared, and especially in this case, in this story, it's very important that they had enough wine. If they ran out of wine, it would be a big thing. Now, we don't know who's getting married, it doesn't say, but we know that Jesus' mother was there. and it's good chance that Jesus knew the family, obviously, because he's getting invited to the wedding. And now it says both him, Jesus, and his disciples were invited. At this point, looking at who Jesus knows now, it's probably Andrew, John, Peter, James, Philip, and Nathaniel. In the book of John, you'll see the term disciples more than you see the term apostles. There's only one chapter that uses the word apostles or even alludes to the 12. That's in chapter 6. But disciple means someone who's learner, who comes under the instruction of somebody else. Now, Jesus is invited to this wedding. There's no better person to invite to a wedding, Jesus. If Jesus isn't part of it, Jesus isn't in the center of it, it's not a great start for your marriage, especially as a Christian person. If Jesus isn't there, isn't the center of it, you need to think about how you plan your weddings. Guys, ladies, one day you will get married, hopefully, I pray. Invite Jesus to your wedding, right? Invite Jesus in general to your life. An invitation to Jesus is one of the best things you can do at the start of any day. Don't forget him. Don't let him just be forgotten in Bethsaida, but instead invite him wherever you go. Now, the problem, the issue, the big deal of this passage. In verse 3 it says, "They ran out of wine, and the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.'" Now, it's interesting to think what transpired before this. If Jesus' mom knew that the wine had finished, then she was probably in the background of all this stuff, figuring out, like, even the days before, like, making sure this is set up, making sure that's set up, because otherwise, if she's just a regular person who's just coming to the wedding, why would she have the background knowledge of, like, hey, we've run out of wine? So apparently, clearly, she was someone important to the wedding planning and running. It's probably the second day, maybe the third day of the feast. The second day is when they have the wedding feast, so wine would be being drunk, whatever the word is, that day. And at this day, there would be this like dialogue between the wife and his bride, maybe from the Song of Solomon. None of you have read that book, right? It's a weird book. You don't want to read that. Essentially, just like a very cute little discussion between the two. And at this time, the master of ceremonies, best man, that's pretty much who this would be. The master of ceremonies would pretty much be a very close friend of the bridegroom, and he'd be running this whole thing. He'd be the one introducing everyone, making sure everyone's taken care of, looking after the wedding. He had a very important job. He would also test the wine before it was given. And then we see this conversation between Jesus and his mother. Now, the wine has run out. And at this occasion, it would be seen as incredibly rude to run out of wine. It'd be full of it would be a social nightmare for the couple and the families. Literally, they could be fined. There could be a lawsuit for not having wine, for running out of something at the wedding. They're meant to make sure, and there's recordings of this, to make sure that everything was taken care of. If people didn't have a good time at the wedding because they ran out of wine, their whole marriage would just be like, oh, there they come, Sarah and Colin. They ran out of wine at their wedding. What a shame. They didn't clearly plan for this. And so it would just be like that kind of like, did you see them? Did you hear about that? They ran out of wine. It's so sad. Socially, it would be so awkward to run out of wine. And at the time, while they're running out of wine, the wife, the bride, and the groom would just be having a good time. They wouldn't know anything in the background. It'd just be the people running everything in the background who would be worrying about this. And they didn't want to bring it up to them because that would have made the whole night extremely, they would be extremely anxious during that night. And so Mary goes to Jesus and says, hey, they've run out of wine. Now, Jesus says something, and when we read this in English, it might sound very rude and harsh, but he says, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." This word woman, in the Greek and in the context, could be better translated into English as ma'am. Not saying, "Woman, no, I don't bother me with this stuff." He says, essentially, this is his mother. He does respect her and love her. But it's more like, "Ma'am," or "Mom, what do you have to do? This doesn't have to do with me. My hour has not yet come." See, when Jesus says, "My hour has not yet come," it's looking forward into his ministry. His hour, this thing that he's calling his hour, is when he gets glorified and lifted on the cross. That's his hour. That's when he's doing what he's come to the earth to do. But he says, "What does your concern have to do with me?" See, Mary was concerned about this couple and what would happen in the situation if they ran out of wine. Now, Jesus isn't unconcerned. He does care about the people, but he's looking forward to when his hour has come, when he's going to do his final work, and he's like, it's not yet here. But in verse 5, we see his mom turn to the servants and say, "Whatever he says to you, do it." So regardless of the fact that Jesus says his hour has not yet come, there's some sort of understanding between him and his mom. There's something for you to do here, Mom. Or Jesus, his mom is saying. It's your time to start working. And so an interesting turn of events when she says, "Do whatever he commands you." It's a command. I mean, whatever he says to you, whatever Jesus says to you, do it. And we can apply this personally in our lives. Do I need to separate you guys? Are you sure? Yeah. I can do it. Are you going to listen? Sure. Thank you. Whenever Jesus tells us to do something, whenever Jesus tells us to do something, he knows more than we do. In the house I used to live in, there was this picture, this frame, where it says, "God knows stuff." And we don't know very much. We like to think we know a lot. We maybe read books, watch TV shows, educational TV shows, cool YouTube videos, all these things that just come and we get inundated with information. But ultimately, Jesus knows. God knows more than we do. And so when there's a command from Jesus, we should follow it. Now, what Jesus is going to tell them to do makes no sense at all. It doesn't make sense. However, being who Jesus is, we're to do it. We're to follow it because he knows. Some footsteps coming. They're slowing down. Who is it? Oh, she got scared, running away. So it might not make sense. It might be confusing, but if we trust in Jesus and have our faith put in Jesus, we can rest assured that what he's telling us to do will make sense in the end. So in verse 6, it tells us, "There were 6 pots of stone, according to the manner of the purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, 'Fill the water pots with water,' and they filled them up to the brim. Now, the water pots, it says, according to the manner of the purification of the Jews. These pots were for the washing of the hands prior to eating. And if all of these pots were used in the hand washing, we can only think that there's a lot of people that need their hand washed at this wedding. Now, all of these pots are going to be used to make wine. Typically, in the old days, wine was watered down so we make it last longer. We're not sure what Jesus makes, but we do know he makes the better wine. So these were huge water pots. It would have taken them quite a long time to fill these guys. Now, here we get to just go to the garden, get a hose, just turn the tap, fill it up, stand there, just kind of tap our foot until it fills, and move to the next one and the next one. They didn't have that ability. They didn't have plumbing like that. Maybe in Rome, it might have been nice, but they're not in Rome. They instead have to go to a well or potentially an already filled water source. Sometimes they'd carve out a cistern, but still they have to go down, pick this up. They may have had to walk 5-10 minutes to get to someplace, fill a bucket, bring it, fill the thing. There's potentially 400 to 680 liters that they have to fill. That's a lot of water. And in this whole time, it's taking time. They're filling water, and they're probably confused. Like, why am I putting water in these things? We're out of wine. Not water. We have plenty of that. Why are we doing this? But they were faithful. They did what they were commanded, regardless of their confusion. Part of that is faith. Now, recognize this. When they filled, Jesus has said fill them, but they filled it to the brim. Have you ever been, at Cultivate, and someone's filled your water cup, and they just keep going and going and going all the way until it just barely gets kind of a bubble, but it doesn't run over? Imagine that. It's silly. It's annoying, huh? Well, these guys, they did that. Well, imagine that they did that. There was no room left at the top. They were faithful to the fullest extent, as far as they can go. And Jesus took that work, and he transformed it. Now, when Jesus tells us to do something, we can kind of do it. We can do it half-heartedly. We can be like, yeah, okay, I'll fill the water, but only this much. That's full. That's full enough. Or we can do it even worse than that, maybe half full. Yeah, it's over half. That's good. How much we do determines the blessing that we get out of it. We just saw there are people out there, up there, myself included, in front, and we put ourselves to the work in Fiji. We sacrificed ourselves, and I can tell you each one of those people, they gave everything that they had. They fully gave themselves all. And it's actually quite a bummer when someone goes on a mission trip and they clearly don't want to be there. They clearly don't give everything. And it does bring a damper to things. But when we give Jesus our all, he takes the work that we give and he multiplies it. So if you're only going to give him 50%, he can only multiply 50%. If you're going to give him 10%, he can only multiply 10%. By giving everything we have, Jesus has more to work with. Jesus could easily just do it himself. Click his fingers, boom, water in there, change it to wine, or just instantly wine. But instead, he includes the people that he's working with. He wants you to have a purpose, a point, a use in what he's doing. So, they don't know why they fill the water. He says to them in verse 8, draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it. So they fill the water pots. They don't know why. And now he's telling them to bring this water to the master of the feast. Surely they're thinking this guy must be crazy. They know what they put in there. They put water in the pots. What is he doing now? Like, we can't bring the master of feast water because he's expecting wine. One of his jobs was to test the wine to make sure it was good when he gives it out to people. And they're bringing him water. But, once again, they followed what he commanded, and they took it. It could have been so weird if they brought him water, he tests it, and he spits it out and says, what are you guys doing? He'd look at the servants first. But instead, they said, all right, we'll take it to the master of the feast, and we'll give it to him. Now, when the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. I'm sure when this happened, when he tasted it and he said, oh, hey, bridegroom, come over here, they probably pooped themselves. Oh my gosh, we gave him water, and now he's calling over the bridegroom, essentially the boss, the person who is in charge of everything. This is the person that we're serving. Now, we know it says here, when the master of feast had tasted the water that was made wine, clearly, at some point, it was made into wine. When that happened, we have no idea. It doesn't say as they took it, when it was in their ladle or whatever they brought it in, it changed into wine. Maybe when it hit the Master of Feast's lips, it changed wine. We don't know. All we know is they took it out of the jar. It was water. When they gave it to him, it had been made wine. I don't know if they saw it happen. I don't know if they were like, whoa, did you see that happen? It was all of a sudden wine. We're not sure. But I'm sure the servants were surprised, shocked. And it's so interesting when God works and you do something and you're not understanding what's happening, and all of a sudden something happens that you weren't expecting. It'll happen to you. It's crazy. You're like, whoa, that's why I did that? That's why you told me to do this? The Lord works in wonderful, crazy ways. And it takes the faith, your faith, to see it happen. It's on his power, but your faith him working through you in that. And so this is what the master of the feast says to the bridegroom. He says, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. Now, servants must be like kind of there, off to the side, not in the way, but listening in. Not only was this water that they gave the master of the feast turned to wine, but it was better wine than what they typically started off with. So as the master of the feast says, typically what they would do is they'd give the good wine in the beginning, because this would cause people to get drunk and lose their senses a little bit. And when they got the inferior wine afterwards, they wouldn't be able to tell that it was lesser wine. Here, Jesus not only supplies the wedding with wine that they need, but better wine than they started with. He went above and beyond. This is what Jesus does for us all the time. Jesus will give us more than we ask for. And I mean, the bridegroom didn't even ask for this, but his mom did. Now, this is a huge compliment to the bridegroom. He didn't know what happened. Neither did the master of the feasts. The bridegroom and the master of the feast did not know what happened. The bridegroom must have been shocked. He's like, wait, we did that? We did that thing? That's the thing that we did? We did this, whoa, cool. He probably maybe, oh yeah, that's what we meant to do. Get the better wine afterwards. This would have been huge for him. Now, running out of wine would have, of course, been horrible and would have been met with social anxiety, and the community would have laughed at him, laughed at the wedding for ages to come. But this does the opposite. This would say to the guests that they're treating them with honor and respect. Going above and beyond for their guests would then, instead of making it super awkward, people would have been honored immensely. And now, instead of people saying, did you guys go to that wedding? Did you remember that wedding when they gave when they ran out of wine? Instead of saying that, they're going to say, do you remember that wedding when they gave the better wine afterwards? That's crazy. What they did was crazy. That was the best wedding ever. I would like them to plan my wedding if they could only pay for it. This is what Jesus did for this couple. He gave the better wine afterwards and changed what would have been a social disaster and flipped it on its head and gave them a better situation. Now, this is what Jesus does for us all the time. Oftentimes, we get ourselves into difficult situations. We fool around, and we've messed up, and we've made our situation a horrible thing. We're just like, oh gosh, what have I done? And then we finally go to Jesus after we tried our own things, and we say, Jesus, can you make it better? And that's what he does. He makes the better wine of our situations. He makes our situations and flips them on our head and uses them for good. And we see that in the life of Joseph, right? Joseph's brothers they sell him into slavery, and he has a horrible time in Egypt. But in the end, he becomes second in command of Egypt. And God said, or Joseph said, that God can take the bad things of this world and use them for good. And this is what he does. So when we give things over to him, when we include him in our lives, when we choose to invite Jesus into what we're doing, he multiplies it and makes it greater, makes it better. Finally, the passage ends in verse 11, saying, "This beginning of the signs of Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him." This is the beginning of his public ministry. From this point on, one thing we'll take a moment is, if you remember when Jesus was conceived, Mary was only engaged to Joseph. And so when she was found with child, it would have been a huge, once again, culturally, I mean, even today, like, big thing. Like, they're not married yet, and she's with child. Joseph could have pushed her away, but instead he took her in because of the angel telling him what was happened. But people would have talked about Mary, and Jesus at this point is around 30 years old. They would have talked about Mary, saying she had relations with somebody. She would have been an outcast. People would have talked about her weirdly. But here, maybe not publicly, but Jesus performing a miracle then takes what Mary said and makes it true, makes it real. She said, she would have probably told everyone, "This child that's in me is from the Lord." And everyone would be like, yeah, sure. But now Jesus has used and worked in her, and he has come out, and he's showing himself, beginning to show himself as the Messiah. And people will now start to be able to see, wait, what Mary did, she was pregnant with the Messiah. And so it confirms what Mary said, or it confirms what Mary was doing, and that she wasn't unfaithful to Joseph. So there's that. So this manifestation, it shows that his disciples believed in him. Now, in the book of John, you'll see this many times where it says his disciples believed in him. And it said it before, afterwards. It's because there's this idea that their belief gets deeper and deeper and deeper as they spend more time with Jesus. And that's our whole life. We believe in Jesus, right? We have faith in him, we trust him. But as we go through our days, it gets deeper and deeper, and it does that by spending time with him. And that's what Jesus did with people. He spent time with them. Like I said, Jesus had the servants fill the water pots. He could have done it himself, but instead he included them. And likewise, the disciples weren't involved in this miracle. I'm sure they heard about it because they believed in him, but they didn't do anything. It was servants. Jesus' first miracle was done with people who he didn't choose, per se. Maybe they became disciples afterwards, but instead, Jesus included somebody. And that's what I want to encourage you guys. Jesus wants to include you in the work that he is doing. He wants you to have a part in it. He wants you to be encouraged by that. And so he's going to command you to do things in your life, and you have the choice to say, yeah, I'm going to do it, or nah, I don't want to do it. And as well, when you say, yes, I'll do it, how much you give pertains to how much he's able to work. So when he commands you, when he includes you in things that he's doing, give it everything. Give it your all. Don't leave anything left behind. Like I said about Charles and Tina, like they give everything that they have, and they just go full force. They don't care about what other people say. We don't care about how tired they are even. They just go and go and go, and that's the encouragement, is like run with endurance, run with strength. Not your endurance, not your strength, but his, because he's faithful to uphold you in those things. So, Lord, I pray that you would, Lord, have your way in our lives, Lord, that when you invite us to do things, when you command us to do things, Lord, that you would just be in the midst of that. That we would give our all, give our 100%, Lord. Leave nothing behind, Lord. I pray that you would just strengthen us to do those things, Lord, to help us to hear your voice when you speak to us. Lord, I pray that you would just let these things marinate in our minds, Lord, in our hearts and our souls, Lord, that we would remember them and that we would remember when you speak to us to act and to go forward, to do what you say, Lord. We thank you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Sweet. Fiji stories? Anyone? Yes, please get some water. I wouldn't want you to get dehydrated.
Would you go remove some water?